So moving on to perm. So perm backlogs are obviously longer than before, but it seems like people are also waiting around for their employer to move on perm to even file perm. That lots of employers are just taking months, sometimes even years, just to get a perm filed. So for someone in that situation, what should they do to make sure their employer actually files a perm for them?
Yeah. This is a really tough question, and honestly, I'm haunted a little bit by scenarios and situations that occurred when I was on the corporate side representing the companies. I know how frustrating it is. I know that a lot of foreign national employees are at the point where they're just begging anyone who will listen to just move my perm forward. And it's obviously understandable from the individual point of view. I mean, that this is what needs to happen for that individual to have a future in the US. So many things come up in the perm process, though, that the individual employee is not allowed to know. And this is where it gets tough on all sides. So, sometimes the immigration attorney makes a mistake or is too bogged down and isn't moving it forward. That can happen. Sometimes that happens on the employer side as well, where the HR contact is just too bogged down, too busy, and can't move everything forward. If your perm has been held up for a few months, that could be the likely scenario. And so in that case, just pushing everyone and like actually following up, making sure everything's moving forward is probably the best way to go. But if a perm gets stuck longer than that, like longer than a couple of months, where you're really not seeing any movement forward or any action or any update on the case, a lot of times it can mean that something else is going on that no one's really allowed to explain to you. Sometimes it means the company's planning layoffs, and they definitely can't tell you about that because it's not public knowledge. And if they're planning layoffs, they've likely told their attorney to just pause on all things perm related. Attorney also can't communicate that to you because it's private information, very confidential. Sometimes there is some issue with another perm at the company that impacts yours. So if the company recently did recruitment for a similar position and found a ton of minimally qualified US workers, sometimes the company is just not ready or willing to move forward with any position related to that because they know that it's not ultimately going to be successful. But they're not going to tell you, hey, a lot of minimally qualified US workers want your job. Instead, they're just going to delay and keep stringing things along. Sometimes there is some sort of weird error that pops up, and that could be an error on any side. It could be a government error, it could be an error in or typo in some kind of required posting. It could be a denial of some other aspect of the case that again you won't necessarily know about because sometimes that implicates some other things about company policy or strategy that they're just never going to tell you about. So yeah, I mean, I heard from a lot of clients at some of the bigger companies right as we were emerging from COVID, right as these companies were planning all of these big layoffs, and they were really dismayed that their perm hadn't been updated or moved forward in 5 or 6 months. And at that case, I was telling them something else is probably going on. It doesn't seem like a normal delay, but it's also not something that you can really pry into and ask for details about. I would say the best strategy or the best way to get real information is see if you can loop in a higher level person at your company who might have access to some of that information. Like the information that the company's attorney gives to a senior manager is going to be a little bit different than the information the company's attorney gives to a software developer. And sometimes the senior manager will have insights into potential company layoffs and all of that. And they're not going to give you all of that information, but they may be able to at least give you a hint or let you know that there's going to be further delays coming up and that the process just really can't move. On the flip side, they can also get to the bottom of things if there is something that can be done. And they can really advocate for you and start to push that forward. I think getting that level of buy-in from the more senior people at your company is key. It's the best thing you can do for your perm case. I know a lot of in-house immigration people and attorneys will get kind of annoyed when you do that, but sometimes it is the only way to get information. And it's I think a structural problem and not really a personal motivational problem or an issue with your attorney caring about the case. or anything like that. So yeah, I know some of the clients, for example, that I've been working with at Amazon and a couple at Google and definitely people at Meta as well. They can't get their perms moved forward. It's impossible. The company has basically paused perm for their type of position indefinitely moving forward. And based on the public announcements of these companies about how they're restructuring and planning more layoffs, or in Meta's case, how perm has just been a disaster because of the settlement, I don't foresee their perms moving forward anytime soon. So unfortunately, a lot of people there are needing to look at other options, and that might mean changing employers. It might mean filing an EB-2 and IW, or it might mean looking at other visa options so that the H-1B doesn't max out or anything like that.